While Minecraft originally released with a pretty limited selection of things to do, tons of updates over the years have added a plethora of new blocks, mobs and items. While some of these have gone on to become staples of the game, there are certain blocks, items and mobs that have become somewhat forgotten by players. Despite some of these having been in the game for a really long time, they are still somewhat unremarkable because they are often either limited in their usability or outclassed by other, more recently added features.
So what up YouTube, it's Luca and welcome to my personal list of the top 5 most forgettable features in Minecraft. So as the intro alluded to, today I'm going to be talking about features in Minecraft, be it blocks, items or mobs, that I think are just kind of useless. That's a pretty big word to use, but I do think that they are kind of unremarkable, which makes them forgettable to a lot of players. You know, if you showed this list to any random Minecraft player, chances are they had completely forgotten about it until they took a look at this list. And like I said in the intro, I believe that this is mainly alluded to these features not really being useful or outclassed in their usability by other features that were perhaps added more recently. And so in this video, for every feature that I'm going to label as forgettable, I'm also going to be suggesting one or more ways of giving them some more use in the game to make them less forgettable. Oh yeah, and before I forget, this video was recorded in version 1.20 of Minecraft, so it may not hold up for any newer versions where these items have potentially increased in usability, or any older versions where these items didn't exist yet. So yeah, I've already talked for way too much in this intro, so let's dive straight into it. Without further ado, this is my personal top 5 most forgettable features in Minecraft. So for our number 5 spot, we have an item which can be found and mined underground, and whose usability is actually kind of hotly debated. We're going to be talking about copper. So copper is by no means a useless material. You can do some stuff with it, but in my opinion, the stuff that you can do with it isn't really all that exciting, and thus that makes copper kind of forgettable, because the things that you can do with it are kind of unremarkable in my opinion. So there's basically 3 things that you can do with copper. Of course, first off, you have to smelt it into an ingot, but once you have those, you can either make a spyglass together with a piece of amethyst. You can make a lightning rod, which will, well, redirect lightning. It's pretty cool. And lastly, you can build these blocks of copper that you can also see on display behind me. So yeah, like I said before, by no means a useless item, but the problem is that the things you can do with copper don't really demand that you go out hunting for copper 24/7. Like for example, I said that you could make a spyglass and a lightning rod with copper, but these two take like no copper at all to craft. I think the spyglass takes 2 copper and the lightning rod may take 3 or also 2. And then of course the blocks of copper do take more if you want to build with those in bulk. But personally, I've never really found myself using these regular blocks of copper. I don't know, it just never feels like they are right for any build that I am doing. But what is interesting is that these copper blocks have an interesting property, and that is that they can be converted into these blue oxidized copper blocks. You can also see some of those behind me. Those actually look really cool, but again, I never use them. And for the oxidized copper, it's mainly because of what you have to do to get them that makes them very tedious to get in large quantities. So if you didn't know, what you need to do to convert your brown copper over here into the blue copper is just leave it outside for an undisclosed amount of time. As you can see, you might have been able to see it, but the block over here that I'm standing next to used to be a brown block, but it is slowly converting into a blue block. It just advanced a stage. And yeah, in due time, it will turn blue, but I've always found that just way too tedious of just placing a large amount of copper blocks outside, then waiting for an undisclosed amount of time. Yeah, because it's not really certain when they are going to advance to the next stage. Once every certain amount of ticks, they just have a chance to convert to, well, a new stage of weathering. And yeah, like I said before, I just feel like that's too much of an effort for, a shade of blue that can't really be replicated. I guess you do have prismarine, but that is, also not that easy to get. But yeah, if I was gonna, use blue blocks, I'd rather use something that is easier to get. But yeah, some people actually really like these brown and blue copper blocks and do use it a lot in their builds, and those people argue that copper is not useless or forgettable at all. That's also why it's at the bottom of this list, all the way at the number 5 spot. So now I will present my idea for how I think you could give copper more of a use. And I think I've come up with a really interesting idea. I would like to make use of copper by adding a new type of shield into the game. So, in Minecraft we have our basic shield, which is really useful because you can block incoming damage for as long as the shield has durability. But this shield was added with the combat update, I believe, which is a pretty long time ago. And ever since then, we haven't really gotten any other forms of defensive tools like this. So I think with copper, we could make a change in that. So yeah, what I'm proposing is we add a new form of shield, a really big shield, like a huge tower shield that is going to provide, more protection. So I would have the crafting recipe be something like this: a shield in the middle, and on the sides we have lines of copper, and that will create this new shield, the tower shield, it will probably be called. So yeah, I already mentioned that the tower shield will have more durability, I believe, but I would also give it some other quirks. I thought about making this thing immune to X strikes, but I think the PvP players wouldn't be too happy with that. In case you're unfamiliar, whenever you're in a PvP situation and your opponent holds up a shield like this, none of your attacks can really do much. But if you have an axe with you and you hit the shield with the axe, the shield will actually be temporarily disabled. So a lot of PvP players use axes to get around shielding opponents. So yeah, I thought about making the new copper tower shield immune to that effect of the axe, but that would probably render axes useless in PvP. And that's not really what I want. That's gonna make a lot of players unhappy. But I do think that we can probably get away with making the tower shield more resistant to the axe swing, so it will be disabled for less long. And also because this is such like a big and heavy shield, one disadvantage I would give it is that while you have the tower shield equipped, you will move slower. So basically I would have it be that if you have the tower shield equipped, while walking or sprinting, you would move only at 75% of the speed that you would walk or sprint at when you don't have the shield equipped. I think that would create a pretty interesting trade-off between having the shield equipped and, being more protected versus not having the shield equipped and being more agile. So I think that would definitely spice up the PvP aspect. And the crafting recipe I showcased only had 6 copper to make this shield, which is still not really enough to make you go out and gather copper in bulk. But in terms of like the status of copper within the mind of a Minecraft player, I think it would definitely become more recognizable if it was part of such, an integral part of the game, the PvP, which it currently isn't. So yeah, that's all of the reasons why I think copper in its current state is kind of underwhelming, and how I think we could make it less forgettable in the mind of a Minecraft player. So this has been our number 5. Now let's move on to our number 4. Next up, we're gonna talk about one of the crops in Minecraft. One that is probably pretty obscure to most players. We're gonna talk about the beetroot. So like I said, the beetroot is probably the most obscure crop to most people, and that is for a simple reason. It doesn't really have much of a use. There's only two things that you can do with beetroots. You can trade them with certain farmer villagers, but that is more easily done with crops like carrots, pumpkins and melons, and even potatoes and wheat, I would say. And the second use case is that you can make beetroot soup with beetroots and a bowl, but similar to all the other soups in Minecraft, like the rabbit stew and the mushroom stew. That's just kind of a suboptimal food source because the soups themselves aren't stackable, even though the bowls are. Yeah, and that has led to the beetroot being kind of forgotten within the community. So I would like to increase its use case. I'm not really sure how. I don't really have a clear-cut idea in my head, like I had for the copper. I do have a few ideas though. I was looking on Wikipedia, what the real-life beetroot is usually used for. And I found that in certain older societies, beetroots were thought to be, really good for your health. And they were often used to help cure certain illnesses and, just general inconveniences to the human body. So I think making the beetroot the main ingredient of a potion of healing would be pretty cool. Currently, the main ingredient for a potion of healing is like a golden melon, a glintering melon, I believe it is called. But I don't know, we could probably replace that. We could probably just get rid of the glintering melon altogether, because outside of, being the ingredient for a potion of healing, it doesn't really have much of a use at all. Or alternatively, you could make the beetroot the main ingredient of the potion of regeneration. Currently, the main ingredient for that thing is a ghast tear, which I never really understood why that was the main ingredient. So replacing that with the beetroot is probably a good choice, especially since the ghast tear also has one other famous use outside of being used to make potions of regeneration. It is also very famously used when crafting an explosive end crystal. So yeah, I think we can safely commence with this replacement without making the ghast tear forgettable. We don't really want that. Yeah, and even if those two don't work out, I think giving a very slight buff to the beetroot as like a food source would be kind of nice. So yeah, I would envision it like if you ate a beetroot, you would get a very small burst of regeneration. Yeah, and I think that if you went through with the effort to create beetroot soup, that upon consumption, it would give you the same small burst of regeneration, in addition to immediately granting you a small bit of health back. So essentially like a mini combination of a potion of regeneration and a potion of healing. I think that could be really interesting. And yeah, I think all of these changes would go a long way to making the beetroot a more well-known crop in Minecraft, so that it isn't really left out anymore. But yeah, that was it for our number 4 spot. Let's move a little further up the list. So for our number 3 spot, we're gonna talk about a mob that I feel has been really forgotten by the player base the more time has gone on. And in fact, I constantly forget that this mob exists until I randomly come across it in the world. We're gonna be talking about our beautiful boys behind here, the llama. So the llama was a pretty cool mob that got added with the World of Color update, I believe, which was like 1.15, I think. But I think its popularity has really regressed as time has gone on, to the point where I would call it the most forgettable mob in the game. And the main problem with the llama is that it's kind of intended as a means of transport, riding a llama, but it doesn't have the right qualities to fill such a role. The biggest problem in this regard is that you can't ride a llama, or at least not in a way that you can other mountable mobs in the game. So yeah, once you have tamed a llama, you can equip it with a carpet, which kind of seems to function like a saddle, only it doesn't really function like a saddle. This is probably the biggest problem with the llama. It's that even if you've equipped it with a carpet, you can't actually control it, you know. I'm pressing WASD, I'm trying to move, but you can't. There is no way to control a llama while riding it, which is really a bummer in my opinion. So if I were to fix the llama, this is the first thing I'd change. I'd make it so that you can actually control it if you have got a saddle equipped. And I'd also make some changes to their pack mechanic. So if you didn't know, the llamas can form like a pack, almost like some kind of conga line. If you put one on a leash, the others will automatically gather behind it and they will follow, as I said, like a pack, like some kind of conga line. Look at them, there they all go. We have 3 of them right now, and I thought you could get more on the leash, but none of these guys really seem interested. But basically this is a really cheap way to transport multiple llamas at once, because as you can see, those other 2 guys are just following this one. No leads or any of that stuff required. So yeah, we already want the llama rideable, so I think this pack behavior should also grant some buffs to the llama itself. Firstly, I think it would be pretty cool if you got a speed buff the more llamas are in your pack. So I think maybe a 10% speed boost per llama that you have in your pack. So here we have 3 llamas, so then the one in the front and the ones in the back would be able to move 30% faster. And you know, if you could control the llama in front while riding it, that would make it even better. I also think it would be pretty cool, since they don't have horse armor or stuff like that, to give them a little like damage resistance once the pack reaches a certain size. So for example, this 3 llamas, once the pack has reached this size, they all get like a 10% resistance to damage. Yeah, and stuff like that I feel would make the llama a more noteworthy addition to the game. Whereas now I feel like they're just kind of useless and outclassed by everything. We've just had the 1.20 update, which added camels, which, you know, those are not that great as well in terms of transportation. I feel like they're definitely worse than the horse or the donkey, but they're still better than the llama. Yeah, so that's kind of what I want, for the llama to be more acknowledged in the game, more noteworthy. Firstly, make them actually controllable when you're on the back of one. And secondly, give them boosts the larger their pack grows. And yeah, that's it for the llama discussion. This has been the number 3 spot. Now let's move on to the number 2 spot on the list. So the next spot on our list is actually gonna go to a group of features that are all related to each other. And more specifically, it's these 3 features that I have in front of me right now. So I was originally only going to include the rabbit's foot on this list, but then I just threw in the actual rabbit and the potion of jump boost as well, because I feel like they've all become somewhat forgettable, despite all of them, I think, having been in the game for quite a long time. So let's start with the original contender, the rabbit's foot. This thing is basically useless. It is only used to make the potion of jump boost, which I also have on this list because I don't think it's worth using. So yeah, outside of that, it doesn't have any use. So there's not much to talk about it with this one. Then the actual rabbit itself. I feel like this thing has become very forgettable, especially in the past 1 or 2 years. I feel like you don't see these guys nearly as often as you used to in older versions of the game. You might be able to find 1 or 2 in the desert, but I think they're mostly confined to just the colder biomes. The snow forest is basically the only biome where I still see these guys. And as for why you would want to have a rabbit, they're not that useful in and of themselves as well. They're basically just a lesser version of a cow. You know, they give you their meat, rabbit meat, which is worse than just beef from a cow. And they also give you rabbit hide, which is basically just a worse version of leather, because you need 4 rabbit hide to craft 1 leather that you can just harvest from a cow normally. So I feel like these guys are just completely outclassed by the cow. And given that they're also more rare, like I just described, I just don't see the use in ever keeping more than 1 or 2 of these guys. And lastly, we have the Potion of Jump Boost. I feel like this is probably the most obscure potion in the game, and that's mostly due to the fact that it's not really useful. So the Potion of Jump Boost does exactly what you'd think. If you throw it at your feet, you can jump higher than you normally can. You can also amplify this potion. So here I have a Potion of Jump Boost level 2. So if I consume this, I will be able to jump much higher. As you can see, I can scale this little cliff here with absolute ease. And one other thing that these potions do is, I believe, I'm not sure about this, but I believe they also make you immune to fall damage. Okay, I lied. They do not in fact make you immune to fall damage. So yeah, even though this potion does not make you immune to fall damage, being able to jump higher and clear larger gaps still seems like a pretty nice attribute to have. Only it's not really that great, otherwise the potion wouldn't be so forgettable. Probably the biggest problem with this potion is that it just isn't worth it. I mean, you have to make this with a rabbit's foot, which, like I mentioned before, rabbits are already quite rare, so it's quite an effort that you're going through to get that ingredient. But even if you have a rabbit's foot farm and you convert it into a Potion of Jump Boost, the benefits just aren't there. For example, a regular Minecraft person can jump 1 block, maybe a little more than 1 block, to actually get on top of it. So it would be very nice if a jump boost potion would allow you to clear 2 blocks, that would be pretty nice. So yeah, I have a level 1 potion here, so let's throw it at our feet to refresh the effect. But that's kind of the problem. As you can see, with a level 1 potion, we can't jump a 2 block vertical gap. Yeah, you actually have to amplify the potion up to level 2 to be able to actually make this. And even then, with a level 2 potion, you still can jump 3 blocks high. So yeah, like I said before, the benefits of this potion just aren't really there. And as for improvements, I'm actually kind of stumped on how you could, improve on all of these things, give them more uses, so that they aren't forgettable. I'm not really sure what you could do with them. So yeah, this is the part where you can give your own input. If you have an idea on how to give any or all 3 of these things more uses, then make sure to tell me in the comments below. Alright, before we get to our number 1, I'd like to give 2 honorable mentions to the features that are lined up right behind me. The first one is the daylight sensor. This is a pretty niche redstone component that can basically be used to detect what time of day it is and then output a signal accordingly. So as you can see, this one here is set to detect when it's night, and as such, now that it's day, it doesn't give an output. But this one here is set to observe when it is day, and since it is day, it outputs a redstone signal. And once it turns to night, this one will power down and stop powering the redstone line, and this one will power up and start powering this redstone line. A lot of people have probably forgotten that these are in the game, because like I said before, they're quite niche, Observing the time of day for a redstone output isn't really that, useful, where you can just have a redstone output always by using a lever or something. However, these things are very useful if you want to make lantern poles and stuff like that. So while it is a niche block, it still, fulfills a role. It still shines in an area where other redstone powering blocks do not, which is making lantern poles. So yeah, that's why it's not included in this list, because it does have a serviceable role that no other redstone component can really fill. And our second honorable mention is this, the furnace in the minecart. A lot of players probably would consider this one worthy of being in the top 5. I don't really see it that way. I mean, I never used this thing, but I always thought it was an interesting alternative to powered rails. So if you put coal in here, the minecart gets powered, and you know, if there had been more rails here, it would have started going along the track. So I've always seen this as an interesting alternative to powered rails, you know, if you don't want to commit to gathering all the gold that is necessary to make those. And yeah, I've always just kind of seen this as a joke item, you know, something that isn't really meant to be of serious use. And like I said before, it does actually have a use. It is kind of a poor man's substitute for a feature that is already established. And I think that's exempted from the list. So yeah, it gets to stay here as an honorable mention. And here we are. My number 1 most forgettable feature in the game. What do you think it is? It is an item that I have already talked about before in one of my other videos. And it's an item that kind of frustrates me and a lot of people with just how useless it is. And it is an item that might not really be considered forgettable in a traditional sense, because it actually kind of has a reputation for how useless it is and how it could be made into something actually useful. For my number 1 most forgettable feature in Minecraft as of right now, I have chosen to go with the Fletcher table. Now, like I said, the Fletcher table actually has kind of a reputation for how useless it is and how much potential it has. People are always saying that this block could be made into something actually useful, because you know, it is part of a long line of these type of workstations. You can see some of them over here, and all of these kind of give villagers certain jobs. Maybe not a campfire, but except for the campfire, all of these blocks can give villagers certain jobs once they are linked to the workstation. But still, all of these provide a function beyond just being a workstation for villagers, except for the Fletcher table. The Fletcher table only exists to give this guy over here, the Fletcher, a job. Now, admittedly, trading sticks for emeralds is a pretty good deal, so you know, this is probably a guy that you want to keep around. But even so, the Fletcher station in and of itself doesn't do anything. It literally has no use outside of being a stepping stone to get this guy. Which, you know, some people might not call that useless, but considering how all these other blocks all have, you know, their own use outside of villager trading and stuff, it seems kind of weird that this one doesn't have a use beyond that. So now, as for how I would improve this station, it will definitely have something to do with bows. Something pretty interesting, I think, is that this could be sort of a crafting station, where if you craft arrows, you would gain double the amount. So, you know, in a regular crafting table, if you craft arrows, you get 4 per craft. So, you know, in a regular crafting table, you get 4 arrows per craft. But I think it would be pretty cool if you input the same crafting recipe into this station. It would give you like 8 arrows. You know, it's a bit niche, and you know, a lot of people are probably running the infinity enchantment anyway, but it is something. Another possible use that just popped into my head is that this station maybe has the potential to be sort of like a smithing table, but then for bows. So, you know, maybe in a future update you could add specific bow trims that you can use this Fletcher table to apply. Maybe each bow trim would give the arrows you fired different particle effects, like, you know, you sometimes see on servers and stuff like that. So yeah, either of those ideas I feel would work well. Especially the bow trim idea, I feel has a lot of potential. But yeah, you know, just give this thing something to do. So yeah guys, that's gonna be it for this video on the top 5 most forgettable features in Minecraft, in my opinion. If you enjoyed this video and want to show that support, then consider liking, subscribing or commenting. If you want to participate in some discussion, then consider commenting as well. I want to know if you agree with this list and what features I forgot are even in the game. But yeah, that's gonna be all for this video. I hope to see you all in a good mood back in the next video. I'm going to go now. Goodbye everyone.